The reason we'll never have a tyranny such as occurred in Germany in the 1930s or Italy in the 1920s, they didn't have systems for checks and balances. We do. We are much more likely than any other governments to have different people controlling the legislature and the executive. Remember, under a parliamentary system, one party governs everything. The prime minister is the prime minister, that is the minister of parliament who's number one. Here we have, the Speaker of the House is from a different party than the president. So we have a built-in system of checks and balances that almost always prevents tyranny. Remember, the framers of the Constitution, particularly Madison, they were not interested in efficiency. They were interested in protection against tyranny. And they were willing to sacrifice efficiency for what they had rebelled against, namely British tyranny. They were also, let me add one more thing. They wrote the Constitution while a revolution was going on in France. They didn't want pure democracy either. They didn't want Robespierre. They wanted a very conservative system of checks and balances with some democracy. But remember, they called themselves a republic. And the Electoral College system, the Senate, are undemocratic, anti-democratic institutions.
So let me ask you then, and I think I suspect I know what your answer will be given what you've just said. For those within the Democratic Party who warn that voting for Trump would be a return to tyranny, or to use the kind of the French Revolutionary example that you just cited, that you'll have a guillotine down in Times Square or something, kind of executing the likes of Liz Cheney and others, you think that's hyperbole?
No, I think it's worse than that. I think the greatest threat to democracy today comes from the hard left of the Democratic Party, the Squad. They want to do away with democracy. Take, for example, James Carville, the most totalitarian mind of any person in America. He recently had a podcast in which he said, I'm not interested in truth. All these people who are interested in truth, no, we have to win. Forget about truth. We're not interested in due process. Free speech for me, but not for thee. So the hard left of the Democrats and the cynical Carvilles of the world are pose the greatest danger to democracy. Why greater than the Republicans? Because the people on the hard left are our future. They're our students. They're the ones who are suppressing speech on campus today. They're the ones who don't want due process for people they disagree with. And so I'm much more worried about the attack on the Constitution, court packing, a range of other things that's coming from the hard left today. But when you combine that with what's coming from the hard right, we are seeing a pincer movement against democracy.
And what? And the middle gets squeezed. Kind of centrism dies.
Look, when you go back and look at Germany in the 1930s, that was the extreme. Everybody was either a communist or a fascist. There was no middle. Today in America, most Americans are in the middle, but the parties are not.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is moving hard left. The Republican Party is moving right. The center isn't as well represented as it should be.
Yeah, I was listening. Tony Blair, I heard him talking about this relatively recently, and he was describing kind of centrism not as being kind of halfway between left and right, but rather as being on the left or the right, but being mature enough to realize you need to kind of meet in the center and kind of work together. And he felt that that's what's kind of disappearing.
Well, Tony Blair is one of the great leaders. I think he had gotten totally dissed improperly in England. Today, of course, we know because of the involvement of the Iraq War, he's unpopular. He was one of the great leaders and a very thoughtful intellectual. And I think he has it exactly right that the pressures are away from the center, but we still have a majority in the center in Great Britain. We have it here in the United States. We have it in Canada. If we just control our politicians and allow the center views of the majority to hold, I think we'll all be better countries.
Yeah, so you think, because this is the last thing I'll ask you, and it's just about society here, because I guess if, say, from people like us who are looking at it from a geographical remove, we're not on kind of Main Street, talking to people on the ground. Our prism for understanding the country is media. It's the big media outlets, it's the big newspapers, and it's online, it's social media, it's platforms like X. And through that prism, you would believe, or you would easily believe, that it is a society completely divided into, cleaved into, kind of, east is east, west and west, and never the twain shall meet.
That's because you watch Fox and you watch CNN. It's as if you live in different worlds. And the same thing is happening in other countries as well. The media exacerbates the divisions. The vast majority of Americans, and I would submit the vast majority of people in Great Britain and Canada and Australia, they care about their family, what's on their table. They want to stay out of wars as much as possible. If you sit down with them or do polls, you'll find they have much more in common. If you don't ask them about which party they support, on substance, they have much more in common than they do with their own parties.
Alan, it has been a real pleasure. Thanks a million for chatting to us.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Such great questions. Thank you.